Okay, we'll move on to item 3.4, community college contributions to jobs and the economy. Vice Chancellor Ton Van Quinterman.
Give me a minute to just set up. Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I will be focused on this deck today. So good morning, President Baca, Vice President Baum, and Chancellor Harris, and members of the board. Joining me this morning is Omid Porjazani, who is visiting dean from Golden West College down in Southern California. I will do a more full introduction later on, but he is going to be helping me in the Q&A format, which is backed by popular demand based on member Izumi's request. So we're going to use that format for some of the slides here. But before I dive into the slides, I wanted to just take a moment to just acknowledge the tremendous leadership that the Chancellor has already shown in this area of workforce. And that's to your point, Member McDougall, that the timing seems to be really ready and ripe statewide, but also nationally. He's made workforce a statewide, an agency-wide goal. He's spoken about the need to focus on workforce at many very visible public forums. He's led the outreach to the California Chamber of Commerce, which only the head of an institution, this institution, can do. And frankly, just moving our panel to today is a signal about the work that is ahead. And I'm looking forward to supporting the Chancellor in him taking workforce to, I believe, what will be a new high for the state. So today, what we're going to do is tackle a few slides here, which gives you a preview of what is right ahead, and you may be getting questions from the field about this. So what we wanted to do is brief you on some set of activities that are happening. If you remember this slide, this is we're in a phase of administrative fixes, focus on the framework of doing what matters for jobs and the economy. And again, this framework says for the limited dollars that we have that are incentive funds, so about 60 million or so, that is not going directly to a portion to the colleges, but those that are incentive funds. So this is in the form of 3 pots of funding, the EWD, the SB 70 Perkins 1B. For these incentive funds, we need to target investments against 3 themes, which are sectors, regions, and technical assistance needed for these regions to deliver against their sector goals. So 3 themes: sectors, regions, technical assistance. And we'll do that through a braided RFA. And all that means is it's a resource allocation strategy where you take these funding streams, which are categoricals and historically have been administered in silos. But instead of administering them in silos, you're going to administer them abiding to all the legal requirement, but under a unified framework. So the framework is doing what matters for jobs and the economy. So a braided RFA format. And what we're going to do is hold steady on the common metrics and accountability measures. So while there's more flexibility to the field and to the regions to target their funding and target their investments, what we need to know and report back to the legislature, and I'll mention this in some of the subsequent slides, is they need to know that students are progressing. And so this is carrying on the theme that you all have worked so hard on, which is the student success theme. And then the common metrics also lay the foundation for the phase 2 and phase 3 in the future, which will be about moving the needle on these metrics and then scaling excellence. Let's scale what practices that are working. So just a few, before I leave this slide, I want to just spend a little bit of time on this issue of regions. So if you remember, Central Valley, at the federal level, they have changed the way that they have administered some of their big funding streams. So if you remember, Central Valley won a $19 million DOL grant, the Department of Labor grant. And the next Helen Benjamin is in the back there. The East Bay recently won $12 million DOL grant. Now, to an outsider, you may think, well, they're lucky, right? But the truth is that if you really dug under what had been happening in those regions, is that those regions have been organizing for a while, and that they had authentic partnerships at play. And it wasn't a set of partners that came together just because of the grant and then did a handshake at that moment in time. They actually were planning and organizing in advance, and that better positioned them for these dollars. So what we're looking to do is, as part of this theme of regions, is incentivizing regions to better position themselves and better organize. So one of the examples that I'd like to share, a recent development, is what's happening in the San Diego Imperial area. In the San Diego Imperial area, there's an organization called SEDECA, which has all the community colleges have come together. So recently, I was invited down there to do a critical conversation. There was an audience of about 200, hosted by multiple colleges down there. And they had asked me my frank opinion on how that region was organized relative to the other regions. And I gave some feedback. And interesting enough, recently they sent me a letter back saying what we're doing is, one, we're strengthening the point person, our regional consortia chair. The prior person is retiring, so they brought somebody in with tremendous expertise that can mobilize the region. Secondly, in their SEDECA organization, which hadn't previously focused a lot on workforce, they're forming a new task force, a consortium underneath this group of CEOs, entirely focused on workforce so that they can mobilize and respond and target money and pursue funding. And as a test of whether or not the organization can turn around, I recently asked them to suggest a new member for our advisory board. And Constance Carroll, who headed up SEDECA, turned around a recommendation in 3 days. That process used to take us months previously. So that gives you an idea of what can happen when the region is well organized. And so who knows what will happen for the San Diego Imperial area. But let's just say that it's moved tremendously in terms of its readiness, and will likely be in the peer sets of Central Valley and East Bay. And we hope many other regions will follow along in that stead. On the next page, so one of the things we tasked, so we talked about the second theme, which was sectors. So the requirement of SB 1402 was that funding be targeted at priority and emergent sectors. And so we tasked the regional consortia of each of these regions to come up, to go through a process that was data-driven, bring together the economic development agencies, their workforce investment boards, their internal partners, their industry partners, come together, braid their data also, in order to come up with 3 priority and up to 2 emergent sectors, so basically 5. And what came back to us is this blueprint that you see here. And this is very helpful. I think Member Ramos brought it up in terms of this, not just the grants, but it's really, if you take a step up, it is the portfolio of grants. How are we targeting your the investments? Because if you think of all of us and how we invest our funds, we look at it from a portfolio approach, right? So at this point, when we have this type of data, then we can look at how to take those incentive dollars and how do we recalibrate our portfolio, right? So for example, you see here, 14 out of the 15 regions picked health, which we predicted. That was predictable. What we had not foreseen was that 14 out of the 15 also picked information communication technology / digital media. And we do not have sufficient investment there. So we are disproportionate in terms of how we're investing in that particular sector compared to some of the others. And so what you'll see as we do the RFA in 2013 is recalibrating based on the dollars that we have. Of course, if we had more dollars, we can do more things. But based on the dollars that we have, we're recalibrating the portfolio according to the data that has come back by the regions. Second is that for all these sectors, now you know which sectors are active in which regions, right? So let's say in health, Kaiser Permanente in your backyard is probably no different as an employer from your neighbor's backyard. And yet, we have a tendency to start from scratch in the region. So what we want to do is make sure that we have the multi-region coordination so that we can leverage curriculum, activities, advisory boards, et cetera, so that we can move faster and don't have to start from scratch. So it's a better use of our resources, and frankly, provides a better peer network for our own administrators and faculty. And the third area is also, as we target funding, we can also then target the development of pathways and movement against all the student success momentum points. And for one, what Michelle Pallotti mentioned earlier, the example of biotech, for example, and engineering. The reason we know to have the conversation around these TMCs and to apply funding in support of those projects is because they fit under these 10. So many of these 10 require TMCs or have transfer pathways in order to deliver the necessary workforce. So if you're thinking about workforce comprehensively, you're looking at transfer programs that are in demand by the workforce, but also the 2-year and certificate programs. So this gives us an idea of really how to better manage this. And again, we're going to do this as an annual process, and it's a little clunky at first, but we'll get better.
Vaughn, before you move on, I want to pause just a moment and cause the board to really underscore the importance of this matrix that you see here. And not unlike the report you saw a moment ago, there are hundreds of hours of work behind this, regional meetings that Vaughn and her colleagues have done up and down the state that have caused these regions to have the very difficult conversations about where their areas of interest need to be, where their priorities are, where the emerging industries are, and we all know that one of the greatest strengths of our system is its size, and at the same time, that's one of our greatest challenges. And the only way that we can think of to deal with workforce education in California is to be able to slice and dice it in a way that can be delivered at the regional and ultimately the local level. So when you look at this, as you heard Vaughn say, it's a little clunky to begin with, but the thought that these conversations will take place annually up and down the state among colleges to focus their energy is what will ultimately allow this system to deliver the workforce education this state needs and deserves. So I just want to thank the people in the field who have sometimes come close to blows over this, and I want to thank Vaughn and her colleagues because this has not been easy, and yet it is absolutely fundamental to our ability to deliver workforce education in this state.
Thank you, Chancellor. All right, so let's go head on to page 4, which is the beginning of our Q&A session here. And we remember we talked about regions, we talked about sectors, and then this is the third theme, which is about technical assistance. And one of these areas has to do with common metrics and accountability measures. So one of the things that we had pledged to the legislature in the reauthorization of SB 1070 in particular, is that we would focus more on outcomes, less on activities and outputs. So let me just give you an example. What's an example of activities versus an example of outcomes? So previously, someone can write back and say, well, we had 5 meetings and 2 career fairs and we had 12 partnerships. That's activity, right? What the legislature wants to know is, have the students progressed? So it ties back to your whole student success agenda. Now, the interesting thing about the workforce area and the pots of money is that it actually goes back to the middle school and then goes forward to the place of employment. So our metrics, our momentum points span much wider range than just the time that they touch the community colleges. So what we did here was we worked on developing a common menu that spanned the whole gamut, that spanned the entire 3 funding streams, and brought together the best thinking of CalPAS, the RP Group, West Ed, the Chancellor's Office, Patrick Perry's team, which built the Student Success Scorecard, and the field. And this is why I have Omid, Dr. Dean Porjanzani here with us, because we wanted to have that feedback up front. How does it affect you in the field as we're defining these common metrics and accountability measures? And then also, what kind of support does the field need for us to actually implement and administer this level of accountability? And so what I'd like to do is first introduce 3 buckets of money. We talked about SB 1402, 1070, and 1B, and frankly, the details of it are probably non-consequential at your level. But the buckets of common metrics and accountability fall into 3 areas. The first is student momentum points. So this should be very familiar. This was all about the Student Success Task Force. And again, our momentum points now, because of the funding streams, we go back to the middle school and forward to the workplace. The second are what are called leading indicators. And they're leading indicators of curriculum alignment to workforce needs. This is how do we know that we're pressing on the right, throttling the right levers that will move the student momentum points, because there's some activities that if you don't recognize and acknowledge because they're hard to do, the needs that push to do that. And then the third, there's several of the RFAs have key roles, what we call key talent, where there's a quality of service measure. So really the first 2 are the most important to the field. So Dean Porjanzani, will you talk to us about these clusters of momentum points? What are they?
Well, it's Vice Chancellor, one fundamental. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. As you mentioned, our work through these grants can extend all the way into the middle school, and then through transfer to university, and then into the workforce, somewhere there in between. So if you think about middle school, we go to middle schools to provide workshops and awareness workshops on latest technologies or what fields are available in, let's say, engineering. And then the question is, well, what is the impact of that? The major impact we all care about is, did they get a job? Did they get a wage gain? But you don't really do that in middle school. So what is the impact? So we need to have these intermediary measurement points for us to figure out whether we're having the impact that we want. So when we go into middle schools, what we're looking for is awareness. Are they aware of the different kinds of jobs that are available in engineering, let's say? So we've done these workshops in the past using grant dollars. What we haven't done is measure the impact of them. Did the students become aware? And 5 years later, did they go into that pathway when they came to a community college? So these momentum points, measuring them, having this launch board or the dashboard that we're building helps us get that visibility in the field and affect our practices based on what outcome we want. So that's an example in the middle school. I'll give you another example from the high school cluster. So we may offer a class in high school in game programming. Now that's a little bit of fun, but at the same time it introduces a lot of math and physics and critical thinking in a contextualized sense. But then you say, well, how does that translate to jobs? Well, we can't know that immediately, but what we can do is measure their awareness. Did they go into that career program? Did they take a class in high school in that field? Did they transfer to us and go into that CTE field? And that allows us to know whether those activities are successful, whether the outcome of those activities is moving the needle on student success.
Now, when we talk about workforce, I think there's often a fear about tracking students, right? So let's talk about that. These common metrics and momentum point, they include the options to go in many directions. So talk about some of the momentum points that are included that allow you to transfer or frankly even go into pathways that are were not what you were initially exposed to.
One of the big benefits of the launch board, this whole dashboard thing that we're building on top of the data that Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry has been putting together, on top of that we're getting data from CalPAS, which gives us visibility into K-12, and data from universities, again through CalPAS. And one of the bigger points of data that we're getting now is wage data. So we actually can see now when a group comes to us for a training in a field, let's say architecture, how much did they make before they came to us? And we actually have visibility now how much they make 2 years after, 3 years after. That's really significant from the field as to, are we doing the right thing? If the students 2 colleges away from me are graduating making $10 more an hour, what is the difference in the curriculum? We don't have that visibility today, but the launch board that's being built will really give us that visibility. And I'm not sure if I'm answering the question that you asked in terms of the pathway.
So through the so it's in the common metrics. Also, if a student is going to the 4-year system or a transfer pathway, those will count. You know, the colleges will get credit for that, in addition to them going into the CTE pathway.
That's right. The other thing that helps us is we're not really interested so much in the field as to the individual student. We don't want to know the names and contact information of a student. What we want to know is what happens to a cohort. We went and did a workshop. We did a class for 30 students. What happens in terms of statistics to that cohort? So that's sort of how we're guarding ourselves against the FERPA compliance issues or anything like that. Is we just want to know at the aggregate level what happens to the students and the pipeline of the pathway of students that we're interacting with.
Okay. All right, so next page, page 6. So there's a set of momentum points, a set of metrics called leading indicators, and this tells us whether or not we're sort of throttling the levers that will lead to the student outcomes that are desired. This was specifically called out in the renewal of SB 1402, that we needed to do more to ensure that there's curriculum alignment with what is the labor market. So some of examples are alignment of skill sets of a program with the needs of the industry, regionalization of stackable certificates, alignment of a certificate with industry recognized credentials, moving a certificate from non-credit to credit. So these are some of the examples. So can you give us a little bit more detail maybe on one of these and how they relate to student outcomes?
Sure. So if we take the first one, the best way of closing the skills gap is make sure that what we're training our students for are actual skills that they'll need when they go to get a job. So our learning modules need to match the skills that the industry needs. That you all know that. But that kind of work doesn't immediately touch a student. So we bring industry advisors together with faculty. We have all these discussions that are supposed to affect the curriculum. What we haven't done in the past, very well perhaps, is close that loop. In other words, once we have these meetings, how much effect did we have on the curriculum? And how well did the students do when they went through that curriculum training, and what kind of jobs did they get? Did they get more jobs? Did they get more salaries? How did that affect the students at the end of the day? So I think the whole idea of the leading indicators is to make sure that we kind of differentiate between activities that touch a student directly. I did this training for them and therefore they finished and got the job, versus activities that we have to do sort of precursor before they actually go and touch the student. So putting curriculum together is an important activity, but it doesn't directly right away touch students. So we need to make sure that those can be measured as well, and that we have a way of seeing how that translates into wages 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, through the whole launch board effort.
Okay, and then the third bucket, I'll just quickly go through this, is a quality of service measures. So there's a set of RFAs that are going out for the folks who are going to lead the regional consortia. There's so mobilize the regions. There's a set of folks who are going to be coordinating across multiple regions where there's the same sector. And so these folks will also be measured not only their ability to move the leading indicators as well as the student outcomes, but also how they performed in terms of the quality of service they're delivering to the system. So that's just gives you a preview of the three sets of buckets of measures that will be coming out in the RFAs. And what we've done is we've had a series of RFA meetups. We've had 3 of them already in December. They're all archived. The audio's archived as well as the presentations, and we'll have more in this month. And we have Twitter accounts, which we're using. We're all learning that skill as well to get the message out to the field. So if any of your constituents are interested in what's going on with the new RFA process, they're welcome to visit the website and listen to the archive. And let me just close by sharing some of recent development back in December. You may be aware, you know of an organization called the AACC, American Association of Community Colleges. Does anybody not aware? Because that's the national national association for all the community colleges. And they put together, under Walter Bumpus, their new CEO, they have a reform agenda called Reclaiming the American Dream, which has received tremendous positive accolades because it's thinking through many of the issues that manifest here, that we're dealing with here. And so they had a series of task force meeting at the end of December. Scott Lay, Ned Daphne, Eloy Oakley were there for different task force, and I was in the one called Closing the Skills Gaps. So there were about a dozen of us sitting in that. And again, this is acknowledging Member McDougall's point. One of the key thoughts there was that a recommendation is to aggressively brand the community colleges as America's workforce system. Not just that we're getting people employed, but we are the system to deliver on workforce. And some of the things that are being thought about at the national level have to do with rethinking policies, procedures, et cetera, that are sort of that can help us take workforce to the next level, how we work with industry, the next level, and then connecting within the sector, the multiple states that touch that sector. So there's the same way that we're connecting multiple regions that share sectors, they'd like to connect states where the sectors, where they share the same sector. So if a sector is active in 5 states, to connect the activities of the 5 states. So we're almost in the work that we're beginning to do feeds and will feed into the work that is being done at a national level, and you can begin to see a lot more aggressive stance at the AACC level with regards to workforce and some of the work that needs to be done to deliver against workforce. So that's what I have today, and we're both open to questions if there's any questions holding you from lunch.
Thanks to the both of you. Having sat in one of your regional gatherings, I was very impressed with the exchange that went on at the one I attended in Mount Sac last fall, and we have such tremendous programs in career tech areas throughout the state, and the work that we do here is so vitally important to ensuring that the students that get into those programs actually get into work areas, and that we are able to respond to industry in a way that adds to that. So congratulations on the work that you're doing. Any questions? Anyone?
Great presentation.
Yes, very good presentation. If there are no questions, thank you very much. We will be breaking for lunch. We have Keitha Mills, who has agreed to present after lunch. Thank you very much. So we'll take a break, and we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock.